Take a deep breath and join me as we journey into the past where each tale unfolds with the richness of lives lived, transporting us to another era entirely. The air is warm and thick with incense. Somewhere nearby, a harp strums softly, its notes twirling like smoke. You're not even 5 years old, and already you're expected to sit still like a miniature statue while a priest in leopard skin mutters something ancient over your bathwater. You're not just any child, you're the chosen one born under a lucky star carved into a ceiling no one else was allowed to see. You're the Pharaoh in training, which sounds exciting until you realize you'll never get to play in the mud without a ceremony attached. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time. I love seeing how far our sleepy travels reach. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are 2 years old and already have more titles than a Roman senator. Son of Ra, Lord of the Two Lands. He who grasps the crook and flail even though you can barely grasp a spoon without flinging lentils onto your lap. You're not being raised like a child. You're being forged like a sacred blade. Not that anyone asked your opinion on the matter. Your caretakers bow too much and speak too little. Nurses hover over you like paranoid hawks, adjusting the angle of your head to make sure the divine skull shape develops properly, flat in the back, rounded on top, a sort of golden egg aesthetic. Sometimes they massage your scalp with strange oils that smell like melted pine trees and goat hooves. Every morning you're bathed in purified water drawn from the Nile at sunrise, then blessed by 5 different specialists, one of whom, oddly enough, always sneezes when he chants. No one finds this suspicious. You do. But you're 3. You can't even say suspicious yet. Your toys are no better. They're carved from sycamore wood, painted bright with ochre and lapis, and come with long-winded backstories. That spinning top, it's a symbol of eternal solar renewal. That doll, it represents the protective fertility goddess Beset, but don't cuddle her too tightly. Her head's detachable. Accidentally decapitate a god symbol, and you might trigger a bad harvest. Or at least a frantic priestly intervention involving goat blood and papyrus fans. You try to eat a pomegranate, and suddenly 10 people are arguing whether it's auspicious for a ruler to ingest red seeds during a waxing moon. A scribe records your expression while you chew. Did the boy smile, frown? Did he spit out a seed? Does that mean rebellion? He writes everything down, then probably sends it to the temple astrologers. Your snack becomes a state document. At night, you don't simply go to bed. You are ceremonially guided into dream space. This includes 2 lullabies sung in minor key, a fumigation of the room with sandalwood, and a protective amulet hung over your little chest to ward off nightmares and scorpions. Sometimes both. A priest checks your blanket for omens. You may wonder, did the Pharaoh's parents at least offer love and comfort? Well, sort of. If they visited, it was with pomp. Your father, the reigning pharaoh, arrives flanked by guards and jackal-shaped standard bearers. He greets you like a royal official. May the breath of life flow through you, my heir, he says while you drool on your linen bib. Your mother visits too more tenderly, though she still refers to herself in third person and smells like myrrh and protocol. She kisses your forehead and whispers, "The gods watch you, little Horus." You just want someone to read you a story that doesn't involve ritual disembowelment. You start to realize that being divine mostly means being watched all the time. You're always being assessed by scribes, priests, diplomats, even household servants who whisper things like, "His Highness sneezed this morning." Could be a sign of strong lungs or impending doom. The line is thin in this world. One day, a new priest is appointed to oversee your spiritual development. He's tall, bald, and smells like garlic and embalming powder. His name means something poetic like voice of the horizon, but you secretly call him Creepy Eyes. He says things like, even the breath of your nose belongs to the gods. Charming. He shows you your own reflection in a polished bronze mirror. You are not a boy, he intones. You are Egypt. You blink. There's a bit of yogurt on your chin. Historians still argue whether these early ceremonial rituals were genuinely believed by the royal family, or if they were merely performative to appease the powerful priesthood. Regardless, you lived them. Whether anyone believed or not, the wait was real. One of your earliest memories is of a white ox being slaughtered in your honor. You were maybe 4. You didn't understand why there was so much chanting or why the courtyard smelled like burnt cinnamon and fear. You remember hiding behind a pillar clutching a painted lion toy while the high priest smeared something red across the altar and yelled your name. Afterward, everyone clapped and called it a good omen. You were offered a honey cake. You took a bite. It had cumin in it. Weird. Later that night, you whispered to your nurse, "Do I have to be Pharaoh?" She smiled tightly and adjusted your beaded collar. Yes, sweet one. That is what the stars decided. And the stars, as we know, are notoriously inflexible. You dream of swimming in the Nile without being followed by 10 attendants, of running barefoot in the courtyard without stepping on an unlucky scarab beetle, of a life where your name isn't spoken in reverent tones, but maybe sung in silly songs by siblings who aren't also your future spouses. There are whispers that a comet was seen the night you were born. A good sign, a bad one. Depends which priest you ask. Some say it means you'll bring glory to Egypt. Others say you'll burn too brightly and too fast. You're 5 years old. You have no idea what any of it means. You just wish the sandals didn't itch so much. And so your reign well, your rehearsal for reigning continues. There will be more ceremonies, more omens, more uneaten figs. Sleep tight, little Pharaoh. You've only just begun. You rise before the sun. Not because you want to, of course. You're 5, and like most 5-year-olds, you'd prefer to stay wrapped in your warm linen sheets, dreaming about hippos and honey cakes. But here in the royal nursery, sleep is something done on a schedule approved by the state. The chamberlain draws the curtain with theatrical flair and announces your wake up like a herald before battle. The living Horus greets the light. You groan. By now you've noticed your childhood isn't really your own. You've become more symbol than sun. Every move you make is carefully orchestrated by tutors, wet nurses, bodyguards, scribes, astrologers, and a parade of anxious advisors. And yes, one of them still insists on measuring your dreams like some kind of ancient sleep scientist with a sandal fetish. You're ushered from your bed with all the tenderness of a tax audit. First comes a small ablution ritual. No ordinary bath, no soap and splash and sing, nope. This bath includes recitations of sacred texts and the careful placement of lotus petals across the surface of the water. The priest overseeing it insists that the petals reflect the strength of your Ka, your spiritual double. One floats sideways and he looks deeply concerned. Breakfast isn't toast and juice. It's a spread of dates, goat cheese, pomegranate seeds, and warm beer that smells like ancient bread. You're not allowed to eat until the first offering is made to your future self. That's right. You offer your own food to a statue of you before you're allowed to enjoy it. And don't even think about skipping the chewing incantation. Yes, that's a thing. After breakfast, your schedule is announced. It's not a suggestion, it's law. You'll attend divine posture instruction stand like Ra, sit like Osiris, followed by writing practice using reed pens so fragile you're afraid to breathe near them. Then there's interpretive history, which is really just someone dramatically acting out your own lineage using puppets, sand drawings, and at least one person who cries on cue every time your great great grandfather's pyramid collapses. It's a lot. And playtime. Well, the concept of play is extremely relative here. Your games are ritual simulations, mock battles, pretend judgment ceremonies, and the occasional symbolic fishing trip where you catch fish from a tank while pretending to conquer chaos. You wear a tiny golden headpiece for this and shout, "I smite thee at a carp." The fish doesn't seem impressed. Even toys come with theological baggage. You've got a figurine of Seth with removable horns to signify duality a lion, with a sun disk embedded in its back, representing Sekhmet, and a board game suspiciously like Senet, only modified to represent the passage of your soul through the duat. You lose a piece and suddenly everyone's whispering about bad omens. You try to run off once, just once. Your sandals slip on the polished limestone and you end up face-planting beside a papyrus plant. 3 priests descend instantly, blessing your fall and asking the gods to interpret your clumsiness. A small crowd gathers. Someone records it as the tumble of the Radiant One. You're grounded for 3 days, which mostly just means extra chanting during dinner. Historians still argue whether pharaonic children were truly isolated or simply encased in a different social bubble surrounded by luxury but deprived of spontaneity. From your tiny perspective, the verdict is clear: you are coddled and imprisoned all at once. There's one bright spot. Her name is Kibi. She's a servant girl about your age assigned to carry scrolls and pick flowers for temple offerings. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, you sneak moments with her near the lotus pond. She shows you how to fold reeds into tiny crocodiles. You teach her how to balance figs on her nose. It feels like rebellion, even though it's just 2 kids being kids. But even that must be hidden. If anyone sees you laughing too freely, a priest will surely descend, worrying that you're becoming frivolous or divinely distracted. The last time you played tag near the granary, a scribe called it chaotic energy unbecoming of Ra's son. You had mud on your feet. Apparently this dishonored the earth goddess. Later that week, you're paraded through a public festival. You're placed on a golden litter borne on the shoulders of guards who smell like copper and onions. The people chant your name, sort of. They chant your throne name, which is something like Neb-Keperur, the eternal radiance of heaven, and toss flower petals at your feet. Children your age wave at you. You wave back. One girl throws you a date wrapped in cloth. A priest confiscates it before it hits your lap. There's a moment where you see your reflection in a tall, polished shield, a tiny figure in a towering crown, draped in gold, surrounded by people, yet achingly alone. You blink. The image blinks back. You're not even allowed to speak freely in public. Every utterance must be filtered through a court translator or divine intermediary. Say something spontaneous and the priests may spend hours debating its meaning. That time you muttered, "I like ducks." They launched an entire ritual to interpret your aquatic preference. You weren't allowed near poultry for 2 weeks. Privacy. That doesn't exist. Even your chamber is guarded night and day. You're watched while you sleep. Sometimes you pretend to be a statue just to mess with the guards. One of them fainted once. You weren't punished, but your room was fumigated with cinnamon and frankincense to ward off pranks. You begin to develop what might charitably be called a disassociation habit. You stare at the ceiling, imagining yourself as a cat, free to leap from roof to roof, nap on warm stone, and knock over ceremonial vases without consequence. You meow at breakfast once. The nurse does not find it charming. Eventually, you're told you'll begin serious training. The phrase sends a chill down your spine. Wasn't all this serious enough? Apparently not. You'll begin daily sessions with the royal vizier, an older man with a beard like an unraveling rope, and a voice like a slowly leaking jar. He teaches you how to sit at court without blinking too much, how to nod at diplomats without agreeing to anything, how to frown thoughtfully at tax reports you don't understand. It's all very dull, but it's also survival. He explains the first real rule of your life. You are always being watched, not just by people, but by God's spirit's ancestors and possibly the occasional ibis. You are a symbol. You are not yours anymore. And so you carry on. You say the lines, you wear the gold. You sit still when you want to run. You smile when the statues smile. You don't ask why anymore. You are the pharaoh in waiting. And your childhood. That ended somewhere around your third honey cake. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat, clutching a reed pen that's about as cooperative as a crocodile on market day. In front of you lies a sheet of freshly smoothed papyrus, expectant and smug. Today's lesson is hieratic script, fast, compact, and utterly unforgiving. Your tutor leans over your shoulder, the scent of date wine and ancient parchment curling into your nostrils, and softly corrects your every stroke with the same tone he might use to lecture a river for being too wet. You are 6 now. Maybe 7 age becomes irrelevant when every day is etched with lessons instead of laughter. Your world is scrolls and sand trays, incense smoke and correctional eyebrow raises. You are taught to read before you can truly think, to write before you understand what words mean. It's not about expression, it's about memorization. Rote, reverent, relentless. Your days are consumed by the written word. Not stories, no bedtime tales here. You copy treaties, tax inventories, and liturgies about hippo-headed gods devouring the hearts of the wicked. If you slip and draw the god Anubis with both eyes on the same side of his head, you have to do it again, and again, and again. No one tells you what happens if you keep messing up. You just assume a jackal will appear in your bed one night. And then there's your mathematics tutor, an elderly man with a comb-over that defies both gravity and grooming. He teaches with stick stones and the persistent belief that all numbers have cosmic properties. You aren't learning how to count apples. You're learning how to measure the sacred geometry of the Nile's flood and estimate tomb dimensions before you've even lost your baby teeth. 3 cubits by 9 is the measure of Osiris' grace, he says solemnly, as if the entire afterlife might collapse if you forget your fractions. Historians still debate how rigorous this education actually was. Did young pharaohs become fluent scribes? Or did they merely play the part until someone else took over the pen? Evidence leans both ways, but from where you sit, cramped and ink-stained, it feels real enough. Your tutors are not limited to the scholarly. You also train with warriors, though training is a generous word. Mostly you're dressed in bronze-scaled armor that clinks with every fidget, and are told to hold a short sword until your arm goes numb. A general with a voice like granite corrects your stance by thumping you lightly with the hilt of his own sword. Wider feet, he says. Less death that way. Then comes theology. Oh, the theology. You study more gods than there are kinds of bread, which is really saying something. Each god has a story, a domain, and a ceremonial snack offering. You memorize chants in praise of Ra Osiris, Isis, Horus, Thoth, Bastet, and more. One god is worshipped using a fish. Another requires you to wear blue. One must never be spoken of during eclipses. You ask what happens if you mix up their feast days. A priest simply closes his eyes and whispers, "Disaster." Some of the rites are beautiful flower offerings floated down the Nile, sacred dances performed under full moons, soft songs sung in languages no one speaks anymore. Others are less so, like the purification ritual involving a goose, a bowl of honey, and 2 uncomfortable hours of silence. And always your progress is measured, not in smiles or praise, but in nods and records. Your tutors note how many syllables you can recite without error, how straight your hieroglyphs are, how convincingly you reenact the myth of Set's betrayal. Your success is treated like a weather report, interesting, but only as long as it affects the crops. There's no room for not feeling it today. No sick days, no tantrums. You tried once, just once, to feign illness, claimed your stomach hurt. 3 hours later, you were being exorcised by 2 sweating priests while your nurse chanted over a bowl of beer and garlic. You haven't faked sick since. You begin to notice something strange while you're being taught to become a god. Everyone else is becoming increasingly mortal around you. Tutors age. Servants develop coughs. One of your nursemaids disappears. Suddenly whispers say she caught a disease from the lower quarters and was quietly sent to the gods. You ask where she went. No one answers. You learn not to ask questions. There are moments, though, tiny golden slivers of mischief that slip through the cracks. You and KB the Scroll Girl sneak into the antechamber of the library and draw mustaches on copies of sacred portraits using charcoal. You once hide a fig in your theology tutor's sandals. He doesn't notice until it squishes. The laughter is worth the scolding. And then there's the day you accidentally set a curtain on fire by leaving a copper mirror in the sunbeam too long. A minor blaze quickly extinguished, but the panic was magnificent. The gods are angry, someone cried. You shrugged and suggested they might just be warm. That earned you an extra hour of purification prayers, and no honey for a week. The older you get, the more the lessons blend together. Days become indistinguishable. You recite, you write, you bow. You learn how to speak in metaphors so grand, they border on parody. The Pharaoh is the horizon come alive. The Pharaoh's breath makes the lotus bloom. You once joked that your burp must be a miracle. No one laughs. One afternoon you're taught diplomacy by watching 2 old men argue over goat tax policy. It lasts 4 hours. You are expected to learn from this. You learn that adults enjoy the sound of their own voices, and then there's the testing. Every few months, the high priest of Amun himself visits to assess your divine progression. He smells like every spice in the market combined, and speaks as though each syllable is carved from granite. You kneel, you recite prayers, you demonstrate posture penmanship in a particularly unpleasant dance dedicated to Hathor's 5th aspect. At the end of each test, he places a hand on your forehead and declares he will do. That's it. That's the review. Not good job. Not I'm proud of you. Just he will do. You begin to wonder, is that all a pharaoh needs to be? Just will do. There's an emptiness under all the gilded perfection. A subtle gnawing thought that maybe none of this is really about you. You're a Rolla walking icon, a future stone carving, with overly muscled arms and no visible expression. And yet, you still try. Because what else is there? So you wake up, grip your reed pen, and try again. The papyrus never changes, but maybe your strokes get a little steadier. You learn to balance the sword a second longer. You remember which fish belongs to which god. You keep folding little reed crocodiles when no one's watching. That might be the only part of you that stays yours. The heavy scent of lotus oil clings to your skin as you walk down the colonnaded corridor. You're maybe 8, now old enough to understand that corridors like this aren't built for walking but for showing off. The sandstone columns stretch skyward, painted in faded reds and lapis, each one carved with your ancestors' exploits. Battles won, temples built, wives acquired like livestock. You've seen enough of these to know the stories are only sort of true. Today is different. Today you're not being tutored or measured or reprimanded. Today you're attending your first funeral. Not as a guest, as a symbol. The dead is someone you knew, a half-brother, a cousin, or maybe just another child of the extended palace brood. You never got terribly close, but you remember his laugh, the way he always tripped over his own sandals the time he tried to ride a palace goose. He was maybe a little older than you. Maybe a little bolder. Maybe someone who asked too many questions. Now he's wrapped in linen and placed in a cedar coffin carved with golden hawks. You ride in a ceremonial bark that creaks under the weight of incense and expectation. The funeral procession glides along the Nile's edge. You stand beside your mother, stoic, painted, unreadable, and your face must be still. Divine. Appropriate. Which mostly means you're not allowed to look sad. You pass crowds of onlookers, some of whom wail and beat their chests. Others chant prayers. Some simply stare. You're not sure whether they grieve for the boy or for the state's idea of him. Either way, you're starting to understand something. Even your death won't belong to you. Historians still argue whether royal children were treated more as symbols than people in times of loss. From your viewpoint, there's no argument. The moment the boy stopped breathing, he became an offering, a narrative, a thing to be displayed. You step off the bark and walk across hot sand toward the tomb entrance, which is flanked by towering Anubis statues. A priest waves a bundle of burning herbs in front of your face. To clear the pathway between flesh and spirit, he mutters. You're not sure if that's meant for the dead or for you. Inside, the air is cooler, thick with chalky silence. Torches flicker against walls painted with scenes of the afterlife, fields of reeds. Golden boats, enormous serpents with too many eyes. The coffin rests on a stone dais, and around it are jars filled with various organs, liver, lungs, intestines. You try not to stare. Then the ceremony begins. A chant rises low and rhythmic like the hum of a swarm just beyond hearing. A priest places your hand on a ceremonial staff. You're expected to raise it. To declare that the soul may pass, you do even though your arm trembles. Then comes the part they didn't warn you about. A high priest pulls open the dead boy's mouth with a bronze tool, performing the opening of the mouth ritual. The idea is to restore the senses in the afterlife so the dead can eat, speak, and breathe again. You watch in numb awe as incense coils into his nose. You're then led to a corner of the tomb to observe your next lesson in pharaohhood, how to handle grief without disrupting the divine order. Your grief isn't welcome unless it's measured. You may sniffle but not sob. You may blink slowly but no tears. If you weep, it better be artistic. Like a statue come to life, not a child mourning a friend. You're told quietly that your presence is what comforts the soul's journey. Your silence is a balm, your stillness a bridge. It sounds noble until you realize it's just another way of saying don't feel too loudly. You walk out of the tomb feeling like something was taken from you, but you're not sure what. Innocence, maybe. Or maybe just the idea that anything in your world could ever be normal. That night, the servants rub your feet with frankincense oil while the scribe dictates how serene you looked. Another records the event in your training log. Demonstrated admirable composure during ceremony of internment. You say nothing. You just stare at the flame of a single oil lamp, wondering what it would be like to run and never stop. For the next few days, the palace is subdued. Music plays but more softly. Dancers rehearse but with fewer sequins. Even your tutors speak in hushed tones. No one mentions the funeral again. The dead are sacred, but they are also inconvenient. You try to ask Kabi if she misses him too. She just shrugs. We all go to Osiris one day, she says. Her eyes flick toward the ceiling as if Osiris might be eavesdropping. You wonder where the boy is now. Is he walking through the fields of reeds, plucking eternal flowers, as the scrolls say? Or is he simply gone? Your own death suddenly feels very real. Not just a concept, but a destination with furniture. What will they do when it's you in the linen? Will the priest still chant? Will anyone miss the child under the crown? You try not to dwell on it, but it lingers. A few weeks later, you're asked to pose for a new mural. The scene you as a radiant young god leading the souls of the departed to paradise. The boy is there too, painted beside you, smiling, perfect unwrinkled. You remember his crooked front tooth. The mural does not. As the artist works, you sit still on your stool. Back straight, eyes fixed ahead. You're draped in linen, your brow smeared with sacred blue powder. Tilt your chin, the artist mutters. Good. More divine, less human. You comply, as always. And then, just for a moment, you let your gaze wander toward a spot in the mural where the artist is adding a lotus blossom. You smile barely. It's small, almost invisible. But it's yours. Your scalp itches. Not from dirt gods, no. You're bathed more often than the temple floor, but from the crown. The golden cobra-crested, vulture-winged, polished sun disk monstrosity currently balanced atop your newly shaved head is less a symbol of majesty and more a head clamp with artistic ambitions. You are 9 years old, and this is the day of your first official crowning rehearsal. Yes, rehearsal, because you're still too young to rule technically, but not too young to be molded, rehearsed, and draped in ceremonial regalia. So heavy, you feel like you're being slowly compacted into the afterlife before you've even lived. You're marched into the great hall of appearances, a space designed to make everyone who enters it feel about as important as a flea on a lion's backside. The columns are painted with fire-red lotus buds, and the ceiling sparkles with tiny stones like a trapped night sky. Scribes crouch near the walls with brushes ready to record your every twitch. Stand straight, someone whispers. No slouching, Osiris never slouched. A courtier approaches bearing the Neem's headdress, those striped, pleated linen folds you've seen, carved into statues since you were barely tall enough to reach a fruit bowl. It smells faintly of cedar and something like old sweat. Then the main event, the chent, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. Red and white curled and peaked, representing dominion over both lands. It's ceremonial, sure, but no one tells you how uncomfortable it is. It wobbles, it pinches, it amplifies the sun like a parabolic oven. You wonder if past pharaohs developed neck issues, but you cannot fidget. You must look serene, timeless. Slightly detached as if already halfway to divinity. You attempt this expression. You probably just look constipated. A priest of exceptional age and eyebrows steps forward. He anoints your head with oils so thick they slide into your ears and blur your vision. He mutters something about divine lineage and cosmic equilibrium while drawing symbols across your bare arms. It feels more like you're being pickled than prepared. And then you must recite the litany of kings, all of them, in order, including the ones who ruled for about 3 weeks before being poisoned by a concubine or eaten by their own pet lion. You've practiced for months. Still, your voice cracks halfway through, Intef the long-fingered. The room goes silent. Someone coughs. You are mortified. But the high priest simply raises one hand and declares, "The gods delight in imperfection, for it is the proof of human humility." Oh, which is their way of saying that was awkward, but we'll allow it. Historians still argue whether child pharaohs were actually crowned this young or merely paraded as divine mascots. What's certain is that you're now expected to sit through endless hours of symbolic duties that look impressive but involve very little input from you. You spend hours pretending to inspect granaries. Excellent storage, you say, while barely suppressing a sneeze from the dust. You nod at temple restorations you didn't ask for and sign decrees you barely understand. Once you suggest reducing fish tax to help poor fishermen, a scribe smiles gently and rephrases it as the boy pharaoh supports aquatic balance. Your idea is shelved. The fish still suffer. The only break comes during midday when you're allowed to rest in the shade of the palace courtyard. KB joins you there. She's older now too, sharper around the edges, her eyes always scanning the corridors like she's waiting for trouble to arrive wearing perfume. You looked regal, she tells you. My crown nearly fell into the incense bowl, you reply. That would have been divine comedy. You laugh just once, carefully, no one hears. Later that week, you're taken to the royal workshops to oversee the crafting of new statuary. You're meant to approve your own likeness carved into basalt. The sculptor has already finished most of it. You stare at the stone version of yourself, muscular, serene eyes wide and all-knowing. It doesn't look like you. You're skinny. Your nose is crooked from a fall last year. You still sleep with a reed doll hidden under your pillow. The statue doesn't know that. The statue could rule nations. You, meanwhile, just want lunch. Do I have to look like that, you ask? Your soul does, the sculptor says, chiseling a perfect jawline. You wonder what would happen if you smashed it. Just picked up a mallet and crack. But instead, you nod approvingly and move along. Every few days, you're asked to appear before your people. You sit in an elevated pavilion draped with gold-threaded linen, waving slowly at a crowd that cheers as if you've cured famine by blinking. Sometimes they throw flowers. Once, someone threw a live duck. The guards were very upset. You try to smile, but it's hard to connect with people when they don't see you. They see a god, a symbol, a hope wrapped in linen and pressure. One afternoon, you overhear two priests arguing. Not about theology, not about taxes, about you. He's still too soft, one says. He asks too many questions. He's observant, the other replies. Better that than another dull echo of his father. You walk away before hearing more. But you start asking fewer questions anyway. The day your statue is unveiled, there's a huge ceremony. Trumpets blare. Dancers twirl. The crowd roars as a curtain is drawn back to reveal you 8 feet tall, immortalized in stone eyes set on eternity. You stand beside it dressed in layers of gold and indigo, holding a ceremonial crook and flail. Your arms ache from the pose, but you don't move. The statue is unveiled in 3 other cities. Copies are sent to temples. Your image is now part of Egypt's architecture. You have officially become a landmark. No one asks how you feel. That night, back in your chamber, you stare at your reflection in polished bronze. You try to mimic the statue's expression. Still, regal, hollow, it's harder than it looks. You lie in bed, wondering what would happen if you just walked into the night, took off the crown, shed the linen, and vanished into the dark like any other boy. You won't, of course. But the idea stays with you. You wake up sticky. Not from sweat, though the Egyptian nights are unforgiving, but from the ceremonial oil they poured over you last night during the fertility blessings. You're 10 now, which in palace terms means puberty with the side of public scrutiny and a thick smear of awkward ritual. This morning, as sunlight slices through the alabaster windows, you are not merely a boy anymore. You are a flowering lotus, a vessel of divine lineage, and most disturbing of all, a groom-in-waiting. To your half-sister, she's older, taller. eyes like polished jet, and a posture so upright it looks painful. She walks like a queen because one day she'll be one. Possibly your queen. Because as everyone in the palace has been not so subtly reminding you, royal blood must stay royal. You're not sure how you feel about her. She's clever. She doesn't smile much. Once you saw her threaten a servant with a bronze hairpin. Another time she gave you a date cake when she thought no one was looking. You're scared of her and a little in awe. Maybe even interested, which makes it worse. The engagement is announced at the festival of the Oped. Trumpets blare. Priests chant. You're both dressed like miniature statues lacquered in eye paint, wearing headdresses too wide to fit through doors without turning sideways. The crowd cheers. Someone releases doves. You feel like a prop in your own life. Historians still argue whether these early pairings were symbolic or consummated. Royal unions were often ceremonial until the pharaoh matured, some scholars claim. Others point to letters, temple etchings, and embalmed honeymoon gifts that say otherwise. From where you're standing on a gilded barge holding her hand, like you're not terrified, it feels real enough. The high priest anoints both your foreheads with scented oil. A scarab is released. Dancers whirl in rhythmic circles. You're meant to recite your vows, but your voice cracks halfway through, beloved of Isis. Everyone pretends not to notice. Afterward, there's a feast. You are paraded through columns of roast duck, honey-glazed dates, and spiced beer. Servants whisper praise. Courtiers bow. Your half-sister gives you a dry nod, then retreats to her own wing. The marriage won't be fully official for some years, but it's begun, and with it a new chapter of discomfort. Later that night, you sit alone in your chamber legs, swinging over a tiled bench, thinking about what just happened. You're married. Sort of. To someone who used to steal your sandals as a prank. You're not even sure what marriage is yet, other than another layer of performance. The next morning, your tutors don't ease up. If anything, they double down. You're assigned new scrolls on lineage legacy, the duties of royal consorts. One lecture covers the symbolic fertility of the Nile, using diagrams of lotus blossoms that make you want to melt into the floor. Another tutor insists you begin practicing romantic phrasing in 3 dialects of Egyptian and 1 in Hittite. You never know whom you'll need to seduce diplomatically. He says utterly serious. You want to scream. Instead, you write the phrase, "Your beauty eclipses the sun" 20 times on a reed parchment, and hope no one notices the little skull you've doodled in the margin. Cabby notices. "You're not enjoying the romantic arts," she asks deadpan. "I'd rather be eaten by hippos," you reply. She shrugs. Hippos are more straightforward. From then on, it becomes a game between you and her, secretly writing absurd pickup lines and slipping them into scroll bundles. Your caw makes my ba want to dance. Are you an amulet? Because I feel oddly protected near you. You laugh for the first time in days. But the real training isn't in words, it's in performance. You're coached in how to walk side by side with your future queen, how to extend your hand at the exact moment she does, how to nod when she speaks without looking bored, how to gaze at her like you're smitten, though in truth your head itches and your sandals are too tight. You're also taught about divine consummation rituals. In theory, of course, at least for now. A priest explains with a straight face how the union of the pharaoh and his consort mirrors the joining of Isis and Osiris Ra and Nutland and Flood. The metaphors are heavy. The diagrams are worse. You try to suppress a snort. The priest glares. "This is sacred knowledge," he hisses. "I believe you," you say. "I just didn't know sacred knowledge came with footnotes." He does not laugh. More unsettling still is the fact that your body is changing and everyone seems to be tracking it. A court healer measures your height, notes the emergence of shoulder bones, and proclaims, He ripens like a fig in midsummer. This is said aloud, in front of people. You want to crawl into a pot and never come out. Even the palace statues seem to stare more now. The stone eyes of old pharaohs and long-dead gods follow you down the halls. You swear one of them judged you yesterday. And then there are the dreams. In them you are walking through the underworld, but instead of facing demons, you're being critiqued by former pharaohs. That's not how you hold a flail, one sneers. Your wife walks faster than you, another says. You wake up sweating heart, pounding the scent of lotus clinging to your sheets. Once during dinner, you accidentally refer to your half-sister as bossy in front of the vizier. He nearly chokes on a grape. She is the embodiment of balance and order, he says. You are blessed to share blood with her. You want to ask what kind of blessing comes with political obligation power struggles and the constant fear of ceremonial incense allergy. But instead, you sip your date wine and smile. You get better at pretending, you always do. Your body grows, your voice deepens. You learn which prayers to whisper on feast days and which to fake. You practice sword drills in the morning and poetry in the afternoon. You kiss your consort's hand in public while barely speaking to her in private. You are 10, maybe 11. And your life is no longer yours, it's Egypt's. It belongs to the Nile, the gods, the dynasty, the muralists. Still at night, you take off the crown. You scratch your scalp. You press your cheek against a cool stone wall and dream of a life where marriage isn't strategy, where love isn't staged, and where being a boy didn't mean becoming a symbol. The next morning you rise, you put on the linen, you nod, you recite. And from somewhere deep inside you, the child who used to play by the lotus pond waves goodbye. The jackal-headed dolls in your chamber weren't always terrifying. Once they were comfort reminders of divine guardians, protectors of your sleep toys disguised as theology. But now they watch you. Glassy eyes, permanent smirks, tiny papyrus scrolls clutched in their painted paws whispering all your secrets to the gods. You're 12 now. Or close enough. Old enough to understand that the palace isn't a home, it's a carefully manicured trap. The floors gleam too clean, the windows are too narrow, and the people closest to you are often the most dangerous. The thing about growing up as a god on earth is that everyone wants something from you. Your favor, your weakness, your downfall. Which is why you've begun to notice your friends are never truly alone with you. There's always someone nearby. A servant refilling wine that doesn't need refilling. A scribe pretending to mend his sandals. A bodyguard staring just a bit too intently at your reflection in the water basin. They're not watching with you. They're watching you. It clicks one evening during a feast. You're seated beside your uncle, your father's younger brother, a military advisor with too many opinions and a talent for pretending not to hate you. He smiles, hands you a slice of honey-roasted duck, and leans in just slightly. Have you ever tasted this with cinnamon? He asks, tone light. You nod. It's good. He nods back. By the next morning, your favorite kitchen boy has vanished. Rumors flutter through the palace like startled birds. Was he stealing? Did he hear something? Did he season something the wrong way? You're not told. You're just handed your breakfast by someone new and warned to be careful what you say during meals. It becomes a pattern. A tutor disappears after you mention you'd rather learn geometry from someone less dusty. A servant is reassigned to the desert temples after you complain that your sandals pinch. Once a scribe is dismissed after laughing too long at one of your jokes. You begin to speak less, to smile less, to become more careful with every nod. You learn that power attracts shadows, and most of them wear perfume. Historians still argue whether young pharaohs were truly targets of courtly intrigue, or merely the figureheads while real power moved behind them. But you can feel the tension. You can hear it in the clipped tones of courtiers. See it in the carefully balanced glances between generals and priests. They are weighing you. Kibi notices too. She's still with you, still your closest thread to normalcy. But even she is cautious now. She places scrolls on your desk like offerings, avoids asking personal questions, and speaks to you as if someone might transcribe her every word. Once when you ask if she trusts anyone in the palace, she just shrugs. Trust isn't safe, she says. Only distance is. So you start inventing distance. You hold your expression like it's made of stone. You begin to mirror the older statues in the palace, neutral gaze, still hands minimal blinking. You speak in short sentences. Ask questions only when necessary. You become, in essence, your own monument in training. The irony is everyone praises this. How regal, they whisper. So controlled, so wise beyond his years. You want to laugh, but of course you don't. Instead, you take note of every whisper in the corridor, every shift in tone between advisors, every change in the guards' schedules. You're not taught to be paranoid, you simply become it. You learn that the word friend in palace speak often means potential liability. That when someone offers you advice, they're also measuring your reaction. That a compliment is never just a compliment, it's a test of ego. One night, your half-sister, the same one you're meant to one day rule beside, invites you to share wine under the stars. It's meant to be poetic, relaxing, a moment of shared vision between future co-rulers. Instead, it feels like an audition. She pours the wine herself, speaks slowly, smiles like a cobra, beautiful and deliberate. She asks you how you plan to handle the western provinces, what taxes you'll shift, which temples you'll favor, and all you can think is, if I answer wrong, will I wake up tomorrow? You pretend to consider, offer vague phrases. We must be thoughtful. Balance is essential. The gods will guide us. She nods. She's done this before. When she stands to leave, she says, "You're learning. That's good." Her sandals click away across the stone. You don't exhale until the sound disappears. The next morning, the royal astrologer tells you that your stars are uncertain, that Jupiter sits awkwardly above your house of legacy. He prescribes a purification ritual. You sit in a smoke-filled room for 3 hours while a priest swings a censer and whispers, "Protect him from himself." You think, no, protect me from them. Even your food begins to taste like suspicion. You chew slowly, wondering whether the sweetness of the melon hides a seed of betrayal. Your nurse, now more a court healer than caregiver, tests every dish before you eat it. She insists it's tradition. You suspect it's because one of the palace bakers was found with poison tucked into a bread mold last season. They say it was meant for someone else, but they don't say who. And so you adapt. You walk more softly, listen more closely, speak in riddles when asked about your plans. You develop a fake habit of favoring certain courtiers just to see how others react. You stop telling people what you really want. You stop wanting things. You are no longer a child. You are a spy inside your own life. Your chambers now contain more scrolls than toys, more silence than laughter. You begin keeping your own notes, coded symbols on bits of reed tucked inside hollow beads. You record who stood where, who bowed too deeply, who brought you dates with just a hint too much eagerness. Sometimes you wake in the night and stare at the ceiling, wondering if you've already become the thing everyone fears, a ruler who trusts no one. You remember a time when you built reed boats and floated them down the palace fountains. That version of you is long gone, drowned maybe, or quietly executed by protocol. Still on occasion, Kibi leaves you small messages in the margins of scrolls, tiny sketches of crocodiles wearing crowns, or a stick figure pharaoh with oversized ears. You say nothing, but you keep them, tucked into your robes. Proof that someone remembers you're human. For now, You kneel on a reed mat head, bowed so low the scent of the floor rushes into your nose, dried lotus charcoal dust and something faintly bitter like old resin. You are 13 now, practically a man by palace standards, old enough to lift ceremonial offerings, chant your own invocations, and, more importantly, submit. To the gods, sort of. To the priesthood, absolutely. It's easy to forget amidst the statues and scrolls and sculpted walls that you're not really in charge. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The throne may have your name carved into it, but it's the temples that decide which direction the wind blows. This morning's lesson began with a simple offering ritual to Amun. 2 hours later, you're still kneeling. You've recited 6 hymns, lit 7 types of incense, poured water from 3 different ceremonial vessels, each one shaped like a different sacred animal. Your knees are numb. Your fingers smell like frankincense. And the priests, they're watching you like hawks in linen, the high priest of Amun. A man who resembles a dried date with eyebrows steps forward, staff in hand, and taps the floor 3 times. You may rise, he says, as if granting you the right to breathe. You do slowly. Your legs protest. Your back twinges. You're not built for this much stillness. His spirit remains unbroken, the priest mutters approvingly. You smile politely. On the inside, you groan. Historians still debate the actual power balance between pharaohs and priests. Some claim the king was absolute sun-made flesh, untouchable. Others argue that the priesthood, especially of Amun, wielded terrifying control over every royal decision. You're living proof of the latter. Every suggestion from the temple arrives, wrapped in velvet and laced with warning. You tried pushing back once. Suggested redirecting some temple grain stores during a regional drought. The gods must be fed first, came the reply, or they may choose to unmake the flood. You backed down, quickly. You've learned now the gods are rarely angry, but the men who speak for them, very much so. Worse still, they now teach you how to become one of them. You study divine protocol, how to enter a temple left foot first, how to greet a god statue, never turn your back, how to feed an image carved in stone without accidentally offending it. Hint the bread must be triangular, not round, and never stale. You memorize which herbs please, which deities, which chants must never be spoken during a waning moon, and how to burn myrrh so the smoke curls in the shape of a heron. It is exhausting. Some of it is fascinating, yes. There's poetry in the old stories. You like the tale of Horus losing his eye in battle, then offering it as a gift. You admire Bastet, the lioness-turned cat goddess who stalks softly through sacred halls. And there's something compelling about Ma'at, the concept of balance and truth. The idea that the universe only functions when everything stays in its place. But the rest? The endless pageantry. The pressure to appear semi-divine even when you have a head cold, it wears thin. You sneeze during a blessing once. The entire room gasps. The boy king is unsettled, someone whispers. No, you say. Just allergic to cedar smoke. Silence. Later, the priests conduct a cleansing ritual anyway, just in case. You begin to feel like a puppet in a ritual theater that never ends. Every sunrise, every temple visit, every public appearance requires precision. Robes must be the correct hue. Sandals must not squeak. Your call must be aligned with the day's energy as determined by a team of temple astrologers who once spent 2 hours debating whether you should wear blue or lapis blue. You choose to wear red just to spite them. That did not go over well. Kibi catches you muttering a few days later, mimicking the priest waving a stick like a staff. O mighty beetle of Ra, grant us thy divine beetleness, you intone with exaggerated drama. She almost chokes laughing. You shouldn't do that, she says. Why not I'm the living Horus? Exactly, she replies, and Horus doesn't get to joke. Point taken. Even your dreams aren't safe anymore. The priesthood sends dream readers to check on you weekly. You describe a vision of sailing through clouds on a boat made of feathers. They spend 4 hours divining its meaning. Clearly symbolic of your transition into spiritual maturity, they say. Also perhaps a warning about seasonal flooding. You begin lying about your dreams, saying nothing, or offering vague images I dreamed of a lotus opening. They nod sagely as if you've just whispered the meaning of life, but truthfully you dream of running, of climbing pyramids barefoot, of shouting at the stars until they blink back. There's one priest who unnerves you more than the others. He's youngish for a temple man with a calm voice and strangely sharp eyes. He tells you once during a private ritual, power must kneel before belief, even yours. You don't respond. You just keep your head bowed. He smirks. From that day on, you begin noticing subtle shifts. A new acolyte watching you during your scroll practice. A different incense blend in your chambers. Someone reporting your daily habits with unusual precision. You know what's happening. They're testing you, watching for signs of rebellion, making sure the living God remembers who really pulls the strings. So you comply, you bow, you chant, you recite the 37 names of Amun without a mistake. You greet the statues with reverence, you listen to omens carved into bird droppings, and yet, you begin keeping notes, little scribbles about temple schedules, priestly feuds, small details no one thinks the pharaoh in training notices. Not because you plan anything, not yet, but because someday you might need to remind the god's servants that their god has a voice. The dream begins the same way every time. You're walking through a field of reeds. The Nile sparkles just beyond your sight, and the sky's impossibly vast, painted in colors no pigment could ever match. Somewhere nearby a harp plays softly, then a shadow moves. The reeds part. A jackal appears, and behind it a scribe with no face holds out a scroll sealed in wax and blood. You always wake up before reading it. And when you do, the dream readers are waiting. This morning your chamber smells like saffron and panic. A priest hovers near your bed with a bronze tray of oils. A scribe unrolls parchment, dipping his brush in anticipation. What did you see? They ask, not unkindly, but insistently. As though your dreams are crop reports. You shrug. A jackal, a scroll, a harp. They exchange glances. Scribble frantically. The high interpreter declares the gods are speaking. Beware of concealed truths. You nod. You've learned it's better to let them find their own meaning. The truth is less poetic, you're just tired. You barely sleep anymore. Because even sleep has become a spectacle. Every night is a struggle between exhaustion and dread. You lie there, linen sheets pulled, tight walls painted with stars you no longer believe in, while the shadows in the corner flicker just a little too long. There's always someone in the corridor. Always a servant brushing past your door. Always eyes. Not always human. Last week, a priest informed you that dreams should now be logged and cross-referenced against temple omens. Your Ka may be receiving divine intelligence, he said, or warnings. You asked, what if I dream about falling into a well full of honey? He frowned, a metaphor for deceit sweetened by illusion. You haven't mentioned dreams since. Historians still debate the weight placed on dreams in pharaonic culture. Some argue they were spiritual weather reports, others that they were over-analyzed bedtime stories. Either way, when you're the pharaoh, your subconscious is state property, so you retreat into daydreams instead. They're safer. You drift during ceremonies. Mentally drift, that is, your body remains rigid, postured, composed. But your mind wanders far away to desert plateaus under starry skies, to the marketplace where a vendor once gave you a fig and asked nothing in return, to that one perfect moment. by the river when KB made you laugh so hard you snorted hibiscus tea. And yet even these are fleeting, because your mind is not a sanctuary, not when it's constantly mined for prophecy. This afternoon you're led into the solar hall, a blindingly white chamber, with gold-tipped columns and ceiling panels shaped like falcon wings. You're here not to pray, but to be prayed to. A group of farmers from the eastern delta kneel before you. They've walked for days. Their hands are cracked, their sandals patched with straw. One holds a carved wooden ibis as an offering. Another presents a bowl of milk and dried figs. They speak in a nervous rush, begging for better weather, more fertile floods, a healthy sun. You're meant to bless them. You are the living Horus, the mediator between heaven and earth, the keystone of Mayat. You touch each of their heads. Whisper the phrases you've memorized. May your harvest be as steady as the river. May your son grow strong beneath Ra's gaze. They weep. They bow. They thank you like you've already saved their lives. And you say nothing else. Because what could you possibly say? You don't control the floods. You don't control the stars. Half the time you barely control your own meals. But they need to believe. And so you let them. Kibi catches you later in the garden, your face buried in a scroll you're not actually reading. You looked impressive, she says. I looked like a statue, you reply. She shrugs. Same thing to them. You sigh. She sits beside you, quiet for a moment. Then she says, you know what the priests fear most? You shake your head. A pharaoh who dreams of his own mind, not the gods. You don't ask how she knows that. You don't need to. Because lately you've begun carving secret messages into the wax of your writing tablets. Practicing thoughts you're not supposed to think. Drafting decrees that begin with what if and end with silence. One night you wander the palace alone, dangerous technically, but you've memorized every guard rotation. You drift past statues, past murals, past rooms filled with incense, haze, and ceremonial clutter. Eventually you find yourself standing in front of a small, disused shrine. One of the lesser gods, Tatnin, or maybe Sokar. The offering bowl is dry. The candles long cold. You stare at it and whisper, do you listen? Or just the ones in wigs and gold? There's no answer, of course. But for a moment the silence feels kind. You return to your chamber before dawn. Your sandals are dusted with soot. No one sees you, or so you think. The next day your dream interpreter tells you the gods are curious. They say your shadow wandered far. You pretend to be confused. They don't press. But that night a fresh incense blend burns in your quarters. One meant to purify wandering thoughts. You cough through the smoke and think I'll need stronger thoughts. Because slowly, quietly, you are starting to plan. Not rebellion, not yet. Just distance. Just a future where your dreams belong to you again. Where your voice is more than echo. Where the scroll in the jackal's paws finally opens. And the name written on it isn't Pharaoh, but yours. You sit motionless, cloaked in indigo linen, stitched with tiny gold suns, as a priest dabs scented oil on your wrists. He murmurs a blessing that floats into the air like perfume. Your head rests against the cold stone of the temple dais. Somewhere a harp sighs. This isn't a coronation, it's a wedding, or something like it. The ceremony is called the Uniting of the Divine Houses. It's meant to bind your Ka and Ba to those of your consort, who happens to be your half-sister, of course, as per usual dynastic protocol. You've already been symbolically promised to her before, but now that your voice no longer cracks and your face holds still, when you're nervous, it's time to seal the divine arrangement. You're 14. The ceremony is public. Loud, overwhelming. You're lifted on a litter and carried through the temple courtyard in a procession of dancers, singers, torchbearers, and priests swinging censers like battle axes. The crowd cheers. Petals rain from balconies. A dozen cows are sacrificed somewhere out of sight. The gods apparently are thrilled. Your consort arrives swathed in transparent linen and malachite makeup. She moves like she's always known this moment would come, and perhaps she has. She's older, sharper. Her smile is precise like a sculptor's chisel. You nod to each other wordless. Neither of you needs to say what you both already know. This is not about love. This is about lineage. Optics, divine narrative. Together you step toward the altar. You kneel. You are bound at the wrist with red and blue cords to symbolize unification. A priest anoints your joined hands and calls you two trees of the horizon. The metaphor is forced. You ignore it. The rest blurs. More chants. A recitation of the 42 laws of Ma'at. A symbolic meal of bread and figs which you barely chew. At some point, a group of older women ululate in the background and someone faints. Afterward, you're escorted into the honeymoon chamber. Yes, it's real. No, you're not alone. You're accompanied by 2 witnesses, 3 priests and a scribe who sits in the corner with an unreadable expression and an aggressively large scroll. This, you're told, is all ritual protocol. You are not expected to consummate the union yet. Tonight is about symbolism. You're to lie beside each other under a canopy embroidered with lotus flowers and star maps. You're to touch hands and sip sweet wine. You're to speak softly of dreams and eternity. You both sip the wine in silence. The canopy flutters in the breeze. The priests chant. Your consort finally mutters, "They're going to make a statue of this, aren't they?" You choke slightly. "Probably." She sighs. "Try not to look too mortal." You don't sleep much that night. Neither does she. The next morning, your union is proclaimed across Egypt. Scribes send messages to distant gnomes. Artists begin sketching mural drafts. A coin is minted showing your 2 profiles facing each other, halos of divine light circling your heads. The symbolism is exhausting. Historians still debate whether these royal unions were truly romantic or just theater. From where you're sitting on a marble throne beside someone whose perfume you now associate with mandatory rituals, it's clear enough. Your love life is less about intimacy and more about alignment. Still, appearances must be kept. You're expected to walk the gardens with her, to sit beside her during temple offerings, to glance at her with subtle reverence whenever a crowd is watching. There's a whole training session for this. A priestess literally critiques your glance angles. You're looking at her like a sibling, she scolds. Try devotion, less confusion, more eternity. KB finds you afterward hunched behind a column, muttering lines from love poems under your breath. Practice going well, she teases. You roll your eyes. I've been told I gaze like a bored crocodile. She smirks. That's generous. She then hands you a scrap of papyrus. Another of her drawings, a stick figure pharaoh offering a fish to a very unimpressed cat. You laugh. You haven't laughed all day. You fold the scrap and tuck it into your belt. Back in court, you receive gifts from other kingdoms congratulating you on your union. Silk from the Levant. Turquoise from Sinai. A very nervous delegation from Nubia offers ostrich feathers and a basket of medicinal herbs. You thank them. Smile. Nod like a real grown pharaoh. Later in private, you discover one of the herbs is aphrodisiacal. You don't bring it up. New scrolls arrive. Duties of kingship, responsibilities of dynastic heirs. Fertility rites illustrated, unfortunately. Your life becomes a calendar of appearances, blessings, and scheduled affection. The intimacy is procedural. You and your consort begin coordinating responses to priests' questions, nodding at the same time during rituals, smiling together with clockwork precision. You're becoming a brand, and yet sometimes she surprises you. One evening beneath the moonlight, she admits, "I wanted to be a high priestess once. Before they told me who I was going to marry." You blink. You'd have been good. I'd have been terrifying, she replies, in the best way. You nod. For a moment, you're not Pharaoh and Queen to be, just two souls orbiting a destiny neither of you chose. Of course, the moment ends. A servant coughs in the corridor. Time resumes, and so does the act. At night, you lie in separate beds in adjoining chambers. The walls are thin. Sometimes you hear her pacing. Other times you imagine she hears you whispering to the stars outside your window, asking them to blink once for freedom, twice for a dream. They never blink. Still you perform, you wave, you lead rituals, you smile at statues. Your touch is ceremonial, your kiss is for murals. Your life is a dance of shadows and expectation, and each day your heart grows quieter. Not colder, just more careful. Because to survive this life of gold-threaded illusion, you must learn to love the world as it is not as it should be. And maybe you'll find a way to carve a small secret space within it that's still yours. A space where glances are real, where the weight of ritual cannot reach, where your hand may someday touch another's not as a symbol but as yourself. Until then you smile, and the kingdom believes it. You're 15, and today you're expected to lead an offering to the gods at sunrise, preside over a land dispute by noon, review temple grain, accounts by afternoon, and appear in a ceremonial dance you didn't rehearse by sunset. Somewhere in there, you're also supposed to breathe. At this stage of your royal education, you've learned to be present without being real. You appear in public draped in white linen so starched you can barely sit. Your feet are polished, your nails scented, and your face painted to perfection. The crowd doesn't see the sweat dripping down your back under the blazing sun. They only see what they want to see, a golden boy of prophecy arms, raised like a bridge between man and heaven. You chant the offerings, pour the wine, sprinkle the grains, say the sacred words. A priest faints from the heat, you don't flinch. Later, you're ushered to the court pavilion for the next performance, judging justice. A dispute is broken out between two farmers over the edge of a canal. One claims his boundary marker was moved during last season's flood. The other says it was the work of crocodiles. You are expected to listen, nod wisely, ask one question, and then issue a decree that preserves harmony, reflects Ma'at, and, if possible, doesn't anger any of the major temples funding irrigation projects nearby. You settle it with the land shall be measured anew, and a shared offering made to Sobek for his guidance. Everyone applauds, you sigh internally. Historians still argue whether pharaohs really ruled in these day-to-day matters, or if viziers and scribes handled everything behind the scenes. In truth, you suspect it's both. The decisions might be handed to you on a silver tray, but the performance is yours to master. Which brings us to the paperwork. Oh, Ra, the paperwork. You have scrolls on tax returns, scrolls on provincial harvest yields, scrolls on temple repairs, scrolls on urgent royal correspondence that mostly involves noble families squabbling over cattle. Your vizier arrives daily with a sheaf so large it could be mistaken for a siege weapon. He calls it your golden duty. You call it the reason my fingers are stained with ink more than divine oil. He dictates summaries while you sign in red ink. Occasionally you pretend to read something before stamping it with your official seal, a coiled cobra mouth open. Sometimes you doodle a little fish in the corner just to see if anyone notices. They don't. You're expected to host foreign dignitaries too. This week it's a delegation from Byblos. They bring gifts carved cedar boxes, scented oils, thin gold rings. They call you Son of the Nile and bow with theatrical reverence. One of them, a teenage envoy with sharp eyes and sharper wit, dares to joke with you at dinner. Is it true, he asks, that your temples have more cows than your granaries? You smile politely. We feed the gods before the people. That way the gods don't complain. He laughs and you realize you miss laughter that isn't calculated. After he leaves, you ask if he can stay longer. The vizier frowns. He is not one of us, he says. You drop the subject. That night, you stand on your balcony looking out over the city of Thebes. Torches flicker in the courtyards below. Distant music carries on, the wind tambourine's voices the echo of a flute. You wonder what it's like to walk through the streets without an escort, to be invisible for a day, to buy your own figs, to make a mistake in public without it becoming legend. KB joins you silent as always. She brings a folded cloth inside a flat loaf of date bread. You skipped dinner, she says. I'm full of protocol, you reply. She doesn't laugh, but she sits beside you. Together you break the bread, eat in quiet defiance of the thousand eyes always watching. You don't speak. You don't need to. The silence between you is real. The only thing that is. Next morning, you're back to rituals. You inaugurate a new obelisk. You tap it 3 times with a bronze staff. You call upon the gods of stone sky and legacy. You're told this obelisk will stand forever. You wonder how long forever really is. You meet with architects later about temple renovations. They argue over whether columns should be shaped like bundled papyrus or open lotus. You suggest something new columns that spiral like vines. They nod, then proceed as if you said nothing. You learn that being divine does not mean being heard. One day a statue has unveiled your likeness, 20 feet high arm, extended as if bestowing peace. It's meant to sit at the temple entrance. You stare at your stone face, your impossibly broad shoulders, your empty gaze. I don't look like that, you mutter. Not yet, someone replies behind you, but you will. And so the days continue. Your calendar overflows. Your image multiplies. Your words are echoed, rephrased, blessed, recorded, and misquoted. Your thoughts are weighed. Your emotions trimmed like hedges. You learn to deliver speeches with gravity, issue orders with grace, and bless infants with a smile that doesn't reveal your longing to run barefoot into the hills. Sometimes you wake at dawn and sit in the darkness before the servants arrive. You close your eyes and imagine you are just a boy. No crown, no gods, no scrolls. Just sky, sand, wind in your hair. And for a moment, just a moment, you forget what it means to be watched. Then the bells chime, the incense is lit, and you rise, back into the golden cage. You are 16 now, and it's time to become a god in war. Not just in theory, not just on papyrus or temple walls. Today, you'll don armor, or rather the appearance of it, because while your generals say you must be seen as a warrior, they don't particularly want you on the front lines. No. You'll ride at the head of the procession, gleaming in bronze and blue, while the actual soldiers march behind you. Dusty, grumbling, real. The whole thing starts at dawn. You're dressed by 3 servants and 1 military advisor who insists the leather straps on your ceremonial cuirass must be exactly the same length on both sides, or it sends a message of imbalance, he says, as if enemy archers will aim more kindly if your buckles are symmetrical. Your helmet is polished so bright it burns your eyes to look at. Your sandals are reinforced. Your spear is real, but its tip is dulled. Wouldn't want the God King to stab anything important by accident. And then there's the chariot. It's lightweight, lacquered in gold leaf, with lotus motifs carved into the panels and a canopy to shade your perfect complexion. You've practiced standing in it for weeks, how to look regal without wobbling, how to raise your arm just so. You ride out through the gates of Thebes as horns blare. People cheer. Children throw petals. Your name is chanted like a mantra. User Matra Light of Re, guardian of the borders. A pigeon poops on your shoulder before the first mile. No one mentions it. You march well. Glide with your forces across miles of desert until you reach the edge of the southern border. There is no war today, no actual threat. But the ceremony must happen. Every year the pharaoh must be seen patrolling the edge of empire. So you do. And in the evening, after the formal inspections, your generals gather in a tent and start discussing things you weren't prepared for: supply shortages, unpaid soldiers, a small rebellion near the copper mines. They lower their voices, but not quite enough. You clear your throat. What rebellion? They stop, exchange glances. Its minor one says, peasants, disrupted deliveries. Because they haven't been paid, you repeat surprised at your own tone. Logistics are complicated, the general says. You let it go. But the seed is planted. Historians still debate whether pharaohs led battles themselves. The murals show glorious charges arms, outstretched enemy armies scattering before God's might. But scrolls and letters tell a different story. Generals grumbling about travel, late reinforcements, and kings more interested in posing than planning. You're not sure which kind you want to be. That night, alone in your tent, you ask the stars what kind of god fears his own army. They don't answer. In the morning, you inspect the troops. You speak to officers, nod at strategy maps, and deliver a rousing speech about order, loyalty, and the eternal breath of Ra. You try to mean it. Some of it you do. But what really sticks with you is the soldier, a young man barely older than you, who hands you a jar of oil for your chariot and says softly, "May the gods watch your back." Not your front, not your soul. Your back. You return to Thebes days later, your procession twice as loud. Trumpeters announce your arrival. Courtiers cheer. The temple bells ring out in celebration of your victory, though nothing was fought, nothing won. And yet, the people believe it. The priests have already painted a new mural, you towering over enemy kings, trampling chaos beneath your wheels. Your spear glows with fire. The enemies wear suspiciously generic beards. You nod at it. You've learned not to question divine PR. Back at court, your duties expand. You are now called into military councils regularly. You sit in polished chambers as generals speak of troop movements, fort upgrades, and strange omens in the desert winds. Your role is to listen, to nod, to authorize. But every now and then you ask a question that makes them flinch. Why do we still tax the copper workers during drought season? Why do half the temple guards get new uniforms while the southern border sleeps in torn sandals? Who audits the grain caravans, and when was the last time they passed through Memphis unrobbed? You don't shout, you don't accuse, you just ask, calmly. But the effect is like shaking a snake basket. One night your vizier comes to you with a scroll. There are whispers, he says carefully. Some say the boy king meddles too much in affairs beyond his age. You take the scroll, roll it slowly between your fingers. And others, you ask. He hesitates. Others say you are becoming your own man. A dangerous thing in this palace. So you start watching again. Not like a child learning now, like a hunter, quiet and alert. You attend war briefings and note who speaks first, who avoids your gaze, who repeats your words later as their own. You develop a habit of stepping into rooms unexpectedly. People learn to keep fewer secrets around you, not because you punish, but because you're listening now. And every week you practice sword work. Quietly. Not ceremonial swings under painted ceilings, but real training. In the stables, at night, with an old captain who once guarded your father and now teaches you where to place your feet when everything else falls apart. Kibi brings you bruises wrapped in linen and questions you don't answer. You're changing, she says once. So's the wind, you reply. She doesn't push. Still the palace watches. You've gone from a figurehead to a presence. From a painted mask to something that makes rooms pause. People start asking in quiet tones what kind of pharaoh you'll become. They forget that you've already begun. And one evening during a blessing at the temple of Ptah, a priest slips. Instead of the eternal child of the sun, he calls you the hand of the horizon. A subtle change. A loaded one. You don't correct him, because you are no longer simply appearing divine. You are starting to act like it. By 17, you begin to sense the shape of your own shadow. It is long now, wide as a colonnade, and sharper than the blade you keep hidden beneath your robes. Not because you expect to use it, but because you no longer trust every door to open without a test. Your name echoes louder across the Nile. Sculptors chisel your likeness with thicker arms and taller brows. Poets describe your wisdom as older than stone, your judgment sweeter than pomegranate. All of which is flattering and false. You are still learning, still listening, still pretending sometimes to know more than you do. But you're no longer a symbol. You're becoming a decision. That's what scares them. Today you're meeting with temple officials regarding the spring census. It should be routine recording births, deaths, tax yields. But it isn't. Because you've recently noticed something strange, the grain tallies don't match the temple records. They never quite match. You clear your throat and ask why the last shipment to the southern granaries shows 20 fewer baskets than the temple accounts suggest. The high scribe smiles. Rats, perhaps. You raise an eyebrow. Big rats. A few chuckle. You don't. You request a full recount, personally overseen. The chamber grows quiet. Historians still debate how much financial control pharaohs exerted, or whether temple bureaucracies kept them at arm's length. In your case, you're starting to see how tangled the ledgers truly are, and who benefits from the knots. So you begin untangling. You ask for duplicate scrolls. You cross-reference shipments against merchant logs. You send scribes to ports unannounced. Within weeks, 3 lower priests are transferred to Nubia. One disappears entirely. A coincidence, surely. Your vizier warns you gently. Too many questions make old scrolls crumble. You thank him and order a new census. You visit the granaries yourself, walking among baskets piled high with barley and emmer wheat. You speak to workers, not their overseers, but the ones lifting sacks and chasing rodents with sticks. They tell you stories of shortages, delays, rations cut in half, and always the same excuse: the gods must eat first. You nod. You smile. You go home, and in your chamber you break a stylized alabaster bowl. Not from anger, from clarity. That night you sit alone with Kabi in the palace garden. They lie to me, you say. They always have, she replies. You crush a lotus stem between your fingers, watch its sap beat against your palm. If I force truth out of them, you ask, what does that make me? She tilts her head, a ruler. You breathe slowly. She adds, maybe even a real one. After that, you begin issuing directives more directly. You bypass advisors. You speak in court less like a student, more like a tactician. You remove 2 minor scribes for incompetence and promote a merchant's daughter with an uncanny memory and no known temple ties. The old guards notice. They smile tighter. A rumor floats through the palace halls that your soul has been clouded by impatience. Another claims you consult foreign spirits. One day a clay amulet shaped like a serpent appears outside your chamber door. A curse, a warning, a joke. You crush it beneath your heel anyway. Soon your consort, yes, her pulls you aside during a royal banquet. The music plays too loudly for others to overhear. They're circling, she says, carefully. Let them, you say. She takes a sip of wine and watches you for a long time. You know, she whispers, there's a version of this where we become statues, smiling forever, saying nothing. You nod. There's another version. And in that one, she asks, we stop pretending. She smiles. Not the public one, a real one. I'd like to see that version, she says. You don't hold hands. You don't make vows. But in that moment, something unspoken binds you tighter than ceremony ever could. A shared awareness that you're both drowning in symbolism and a mutual quiet decision to swim against it. Then comes the drought. The Nile fails to rise as expected. Farmers panic. Crops wither. The air thickens with desperation and the priesthood. They blame the stars, the omens, you. A divine imbalance, they say. The gods are displeased. Your advisors suggest a public sacrifice, 3 oxen, maybe 7. A visible act of penitence. You decline. Instead, you visit the temples yourself. No fanfare, no guards, just a robe, sandals, and your name. You stand before the statue of a moon, towering and impassive, and you speak. Not to beg, but to ask, if I'm your vessel, you murmur, then guide me. Not with riddles, not with hunger, but with sense. or silence. No lightning falls. No fire erupts. But the priest who watches you from the shadows says nothing when you leave. Later that week, you authorize a redistribution of temple reserves. The grain goes south. The beer goes to the laborers. The scribes protest. The high priest refuses to bless your next appearance. You don't care, because the people eat. And in the square below your balcony, they begin chanting your name, not like a prayer, but like trust. You stand taller, not because you're stronger, but because you're finally choosing the weight you carry. You still dream of jackals, of reeds, of that scroll unopened. But now in your dream, you reach out and break the seal. You don't read it yet, but you know you will. You wake to thunder. Not a storm the people. A wave of voices crashes below your window, echoing through the Theban stone corridors like the Nile itself has come alive. You rise, draw back the drape, and peer into the golden morning. Thousands have gathered, not for a ceremony, not for a holiday. For you, word has spread of your grain decrees, of your temple visit, of the redistribution that defied the gods' mouthpieces. And the people, skinny farmers, sandal makers, midwives. Aging potters, wild-haired children are chanting not in chorus, but with urgency. Pharaoh is listening. Pharaoh brings justice. Pharaoh is real. It is exhilarating. It is terrifying. You are not ready, and yet you are. You dress without help. No paint, no gold collar. Just a linen tunic, a modest pectoral, and your own 2 hands. When you step onto the balcony, the crowd doesn't roar, they fall silent. For a moment, no one breathes. Then you raise one hand, not in blessing, not in command. In greeting, the chant resumes louder than before. Somewhere in that roar, something cracks in you, something brittle, something ceremonial. And what's left behind is strangely whole. But that's only the surface. Because behind the palace walls, the high priesthood does not cheer. They do not chant. They write. They gather. They plot. The next morning, you're summoned to the Grand Hall of Records for what is ostensibly a discussion of temple expansion budgets. You are met by 12 priests, none of them smiling. You sit. They begin. The priest of Amun speaks first. We are concerned, he says, that recent decisions have disrupted the balance. You fold your hands. The balance was already broken. I chose to acknowledge it. He blinks. Another priest, older, drier, adds, the gods are not to be questioned by their vessel. And here you pause. Let the silence grow thick. Then perhaps they should have picked someone quieter. That stops them. They shift. Murmur. Exchange glances. One clears his throat and says, you risk isolating the divine from the throne. You nod, or reminding it who the throne serves. Historians still debate whether any pharaoh ever truly challenged the priesthood of Amun. But if they did, it might have looked like the subtle words. Measured tone. A silent war fought with scrolls and stares. From that day forward, you notice changes. A request for a ceremony goes missing. A temple renovation is delayed. A shipment of cedar disappears somewhere between Memphis and Abydos. People who once bowed deeply now glance sideways. And yet the people grow louder. Their offerings multiply. Their songs change. You're no longer son of the sun. You're voice of the valley. The pharaoh who walks. One night you find graffiti near the temple walls. Simple ochre on limestone. He bleeds, he listens, he is ours. You have it preserved. Not because it's flattering, because it's true. Meanwhile, your consort begins holding court more frequently. Not with you, but beside you. Her voice is colder, sharper. She cuts through lies like a sculptor through soft granite. Rumor spreads that she has threatened 3 governors and slapped 1 scribe. You ask her if it's true. She shrugs. We don't have time for cowards. She's not wrong. Kibi brings you new reports. Unrest near the Delta. Whispers of military loyalty drifting toward temple-backed nobles. coded messages being passed in coded rituals. A steward accidentally drops a scroll that contains nothing, just a blank sheet. But you recognize the seal, the same seal that once marked the death records for your brother. You hold it for a long time, then burn it. You call a private meeting with your generals, 3 trusted ones. You ask them not for war, but for truth. Who do you follow, you ask softly. They don't answer at first. Then one steps forward. He bows. You, he says, but only if you lead. You exhale. The first real breath of the year. Because what they don't understand, these priests, these whispering power brokers, is that you do not want a war. But if one comes, you will not be buried in gold without a word. And still, the pressure grows. A temple in Karnak holds a prayer vigil without inviting you. A statue of a moon is paraded through the streets on a bark, but no one summons your blessing. You're not being erased, you're being tested. So you respond. You declare a new ritual. The day of listening, where any citizen may bring a petition directly to the pharaoh. Once a month. No priests, no scribes, no ceremony. Just you. The temples react with horror. Unfiltered voices invite chaos. Truth often does you reply. The people line up in droves. The old, the sick, the poor. Women with cracked hands and men with missing teeth. Children carrying bundles of wilted herbs. They kneel before you, and you do the unthinkable. You kneel back. You listen, not as a god, but as their pharaoh. And it works. Not everywhere, not at once. But word spreads from city to village, from farmer to merchant to boatman that you care, that you see. That the pharaoh is not a statue in a box. He is awake. And so the tide shifts again. The temples can't stop the flood, so they try to ride it. A new priest approaches you, young, shrewd, eager. He praises your reforms, offers partnership, invites you to co-author a new prayer cycle. You nod, politely, and decline, because the moment you let them rewrite your truth, it becomes theirs again. Instead, you keep walking the line between sacred and secular gold and grain, silence, and speech. It is exhausting, it is fragile, but it is real. You sleep little. But when you do, the jackal returns. This time he speaks. You cannot be both God and man, he says. You look him in the eye. Watch me, you're 18 now. Not a boy, not quite a myth. Something in between, a creature of routine and ritual, rebellion and restraint. Your hands are calloused, not from labor, but from holding too much, the crook and flail, the weight of silence, the sharp edge of expectation. The palace has changed around you. Rooms that once echoed with prayers now host strategy councils. Corridors once swept for omens now bustle with merchants, messengers, and architects. The scent of incense still lingers, but now it mingles with ink oil and sweat. Because you've begun building things. Not just monuments, not just statues, but systems. You establish a new office for auditing temple grain, manned not by priests, but by neutral scribes trained by your own court. You create a tiered tax relief plan for provinces hit hardest by drought. You initiate reforms in soldier pay, cutting out middle collectors who'd long been skimming from rations. Each decree ripples outward. Some inspire applause, others spark outrage. One temple sends you a veiled threat in the form of a rare white ibis, a sign of divine displeasure, they say. You feed it. Publicly, your generals grow more loyal. Your consort grows more powerful. And the people, they begin calling you something new, he who remembers us. You don't correct them. But while your world expands, the air around you tightens. You can feel the palace watching, walls bending with secret scrolls whispering when you pass. The old priests who once called you a divine child now mutter about hubris, about a mortal stepping too far into Ra's seat. And one morning there's a sign, not in the stars, not in your dreams, but on your food tray, a small green scarab, dead, flattened beneath a fig. You stare at it. You eat the fig anyway. Historians still argue whether pharaohs were assassinated or merely faded. But you've read the letters. You've traced the patterns. Some disappearances were not accidental. So you start taking precautions. You rotate your guards twice daily. You sleep in different chambers. You never drink from an unsealed vessel. Even KB doesn't know where you'll be most nights. She notices. Of course she does. You're hiding, she says one evening, as you sit by the riverbank, cloaked in gray linen, disguised as a merchant's son. I'm preparing you, correct her. She nods. Then she adds, just remember there's no point in surviving if you stop being who you are. You don't answer, but you remember it. Meanwhile, the priesthood launches its own offensive. They start by rewriting your lineage, insisting that your father's line was less divine than once believed. They question your mother's titles. They circulate scrolls suggesting that your reforms are echoes of foreign influence. You allow it for a while. Then you make your move. You commission a new temple, not to a god, but to Mayat herself. Not a statue, a concept, the living principle of balance and truth. You dedicate it not with chance, but with action, a public trial, the first in decades, where a corrupt tax collector is brought before the people and sentenced without a single priest present. The crowd roars. The temples go silent. And you speak, let Mayat guide us all not through mystery, but through light. That quote is carved in stone by morning. That week, 5 temples cancel rituals. One declares an eclipse a curse on your reign. You respond by building schools, real ones, not just for scribes or nobles, but for children of artisans and farmers. You assign tutors, you send books. You tell the people knowledge is the gift of the gods. It must be shared. The temples call you arrogant. The people call you hopeful. You begin holding court beneath open skies. You invite guests who have never seen the inside of a palace, potters, weavers, barge makers. You listen. You learn. You record. You create something dangerous, a memory that doesn't rely on priests. And that's when the sickness begins. Small at first, a fever, a chill, but it lingers. Your physician says it's likely from poor air in the old audience hall. Others whisper darker things. KB brings you cedar ash in a pouch pressed into your palm without a word. Protection, she says. You sleep fitfully, dreams return. But they've changed. No longer reeds and jackals. Now corridors that lead nowhere. Doors that lock behind you. Statues that bleed. You tell no one. Because while your body trembles, your mind stays sharp. Sharper than ever. You rewrite legal codes. You prepare an emergency grain route from Nubia. You begin carving your own legacy into stone, not through statues, but through letters, decrees, poems, even lullabies. You've become a library in flesh, and you're beginning to wonder how long that flesh will last. One evening, your consort comes to you. She's wearing red, not ceremonial, personal. You're fading, she says. I'm crystallizing, you reply. She studies you. You've done enough. You close your eyes, not yet. You ask for one final offering, not of gold, not of incense, but of silence. 1 hour at sunrise where no one speaks, where the city listens only to the wind, the river, and its own heart. It happens, and in that hour you hear it too, the world turning. And for the first time, you believe the gods might actually be listening, not because you shouted, but because you whispered something true. You're 19. The fire that once surged through you now flickers quietly behind your ribs. Not out. Never out. But cautious. Tempered. Like a blade cooled after too many hammerings. You don't walk as fast. Your sleep is scattered into fragments. Your voice still steady in public, sometimes cracks in private. But you press on. Because you know what few others ever learn. Mortality isn't the enemy, forgetting is. Today you attend your own festival. Not officially, of course. It's the annual Sed festival, a rite meant to renew the Pharaoh's strength and divine legitimacy. Traditionally, it's performed after 30 years of rule. You've ruled for 6. You're not even 20. And yet, the temple has pushed for it. An early Sed festival, they said. A show of vitality, of cosmic harmony. You suspect the truth, it's a loyalty test. And a trap. The ceremony is vast, painstaking, designed to exhaust even the healthiest ruler. You are expected to run laps between ceremonial markers, leap over sacred boundaries, lift heavy relics, recite dozens of invocations, and finish it all without breaking your expression. You accept. Because if they want to test your strength, they deserve to see it. You rise before the sun. Dress in white linen. Bind your joints. Inhale the oils of peppermint and myrrh. You step into the sacred courtyard, its limestone tiles still cool from the night. The people gather. The priests chant. The court watches. And you begin, step after step, lap after lap. Every footfall echoes through the air like the ticking of some divine clock. You leap, you run, you endure. You complete the final round, breathless, shining with sweat, your heart a drumbeat of pure defiance. You stand beneath the obelisk, and you raise both arms. They cheer, not out of pity, not for performance, but because you've shown them something truer than divinity, a god who bleeds but finishes anyway. That night your fever returns. They call for your physician. He presses his fingers to your pulse, frowns, orders a series of herbs, oils, fumigations. Your consort sits silently by the window face, unreadable. Kibi visits in secret. She brings honey water, cool cloth. A list of names temple loyalists suspected turncoats generals who hesitate. You should rest, she whispers. You shake your head. I should write. And so you do. You draft letters, directives, final thoughts. One scroll is labeled, "For the people." Another, "For my successor." A third, "For the wind." No recipient, just reflections. Dreams. A kind of whispering into time. You begin a law that will redistribute a portion of temple wealth permanently back to the provinces. You title it the Balance Decree. You know it won't be passed immediately. Maybe not in your lifetime. But it will exist. And that to you is enough. Historians still debate whether such reforms were ever real if young pharaohs wrote laws that outlived their bodies. But you've buried your words in stone. Not for acclaim, for memory. Your consort comes to you again. She reads the scrolls, says nothing, then kneels beside your bed and places her forehead against your shoulder. "I hated you once," she murmurs. "I know," you whisper. She laughs a dry, exhausted sound. "I don't anymore." That is enough. Later that week, you request to visit the tomb being carved for you. Everyone objects. You insist. And so they prepare a procession. Slow, somber. A short journey beyond the valley into the rock face shaped for eternity. You ride in a small litterhead-wrapped skin, pale under the sunlight. The workers clear the path. The artists step back. You descend the scaffolding with shaking hands. It isn't finished. There are unpainted walls, uncut glyphs, an empty sarcophagus. But it breathes with possibility. You run your fingers across the carved scene of your coronation. Your first battle. The festival just days ago. You whisper to no one, "Let it be enough." And then you pause. Turn to the chief scribe. "Leave a wall blank," you tell him. He frowns. "For what, Majesty?" "For what comes after." That night you sleep without waking. The palace is quiet. The bells do not ring. But somewhere in the street below, a child asks their mother why the stars seem closer tonight. The mother says nothing. She only looks up and smiles. Because your name has begun to drift across Egypt, not as a command, but as a story. And that's how it will continue. In ink. In wind. In quiet prayers whispered not to statues, but to the memory of a boy who walked with the gods and dared to walk away from them. Not to escape, but to lead. The sun rises and you don't. Not immediately. Not as you once did, sprightly, ceremonial, radiant. Now you rise slowly, deliberately. Each breath is a conscious act. each blink a small negotiation between body and soul. You are 20. You've lived longer than many predicted. Longer than the boy they dressed in gold and fed with prayers. Longer than some wanted. But the body remembers. You've become a scholar of your own deterioration. Your joints whisper secrets before storms. Your spine hums with the knowledge of too many kneelings. Your lungs, once loud with commands, now flutter like cautious birds. You don't fear it. You don't welcome it either. You record it. Every morning you dictate a small scroll, not laws, not edicts, but sensations. The smell of the river, the shape of a cough, the weight of dreams. You're building a personal canon not for historians, but for yourself. You've learned that memory is the only immortality worth chasing. Still, duties call. You sit in council less often now, but when you do, people listen. Your words are fewer, your silence is heavier. You don't need to raise your voice. Your stillness does the work. A general begins to argue in your presence and stops mid-sentence, realizing what your silence means. A priest suggests postponing a civic decree. You raise one eyebrow. The decree is passed the next day. Historians later describe this period as the quiet reign. But there was nothing quiet about it. Beneath the surface, you are as sharp as ever. The reforms continue. The temples negotiate more carefully. Even the walls begin to reflect your vision. Yes, the walls. Your tomb is nearly complete. But you've changed the design. Gone are the endless rows of gods towering over bowed mortals. Instead, you've ordered panels of daily life: a boy fishing by the Nile, a woman grinding grain, a child riding a goat. You insist that your final resting place tell the story of Egypt itself, not just the divine version of you. The artisans protest. You insist harder. One night, KB brings you a carved stone she found abandoned near the work site. It's a rejected panel, your likeness exaggerated, and armored slaying enemies that don't even look human. You look at it for a long time, then say bury it. Not in the tomb, in the ground, deep. She does. Meanwhile, your consort has assumed increasing authority. You've been grooming her not for ornament, but for command. She issues decrees, oversees audits, leads ceremonies. Some whisper that she rules in your place. They're half right. She rules beside you. Once she says while examining a border map, "We were forged for this." You nod. Not born. She looks up. Born to repeat, forged to change. It's the highest compliment she's ever given you. That night you both walk the palace gardens. Not hand in hand, but side by side. The silence between you is companionable, even affectionate. A servant tries to follow, you wave him off. You need no witness, because not every legacy needs to be carved in stone. Some are written in footsteps. A week later you wake with fire in your bones. Not metaphorical, real. Your breath wheezes. Your ribs ache. The physician applies balm and murmurs a spell so old it sounds like rain. You close your eyes and picture the Nile slow silver stretching toward the sea. You don't ask if you're dying. You've long stopped fearing that. Instead, you ask for your scrolls. You sign 3 decrees. One enforces your education reforms. Another grants amnesty to a long-forgotten province. The third. It simply reads, "Let no god claim what he does not serve." You roll it, seal it, and place it in a wooden box. KB takes it without a word. The following evening, you ask to see the stars. They carry you to the highest terrace. You lie back on a bed of woven reeds wrapped in linen head against a folded robe. Your consort sits beside you, arms crossed, watching the horizon. Kabi stands nearby, silent as always. You look up and wonder how many of those stars are already gone. How many are just memories of light? You smile. You've always liked that thought. The priests offer a final blessing. You let them. They recite your titles. You let them. But when they call you immortal, you shake your head gently and whisper not immortal, just remembered. They don't understand. But KB does. Your consort does. And soon the people will too. Because the boy who once played with reed boats now commands fleets. The boy who once asked if figs were lucky now writes laws in their shade. The boy who once feared the crown now wears it like skin. And when you sleep finally deeply, the wind carries your breath across the rooftops of Thebes. No thunder, no horns, just the rustle of leaves, the hush of sandals, and the soft, stubborn truth of a life fully lived. You no longer feel the linen on your shoulders. It's draped with care, white, freshly pressed, perfumed with lotus and neroli, but your skin has grown distant from sensation. The air tastes like crushed chalk and old cedar. Somewhere, a priest murmurs the 54th invocation of rejoining, but his voice seems to drift behind a veil. You're not dead, but you're closer than you've ever been. 21. Your birthday passed with only soft music, shared bread, and a kiss on the forehead from your consort. No golden banquets, no drums. You'd asked for quiet. You'd been given reverence. The palace slows to match your breath now. Scribes whisper in doorways. Servants float rather than walk. Guards shift less. Everyone listens for the sound of you. And you listen for everything else. The Nile has changed pitch. Its flow sounds heavier. The wind through the papyrus leaves behind the stables no longer rustles, it hums. You once feared the afterlife would feel like this, a slow unraveling, a body turning into myth. But it isn't fear that visits you now. It's a strange blooming calm. You ask to see your tomb again. There's resistance at first, too far, too tiring, too symbolic. You insist. The journey is slow. You ride in a small chair of bronze and reed, carried not by servants but by 4 of your personal guardmen, who once joked with you during military drills, who wept the first time you spoke their names in public. The tomb is ready now. The wall you left blank still waits. You stand before it, hands shaking. Someone offers you a brush. You don't take it. Instead, you lean forward and whisper, just a breath, just a sentence. No one hears it. No one needs to. You leave the space as it is. Because unfinished things invite memory. That night, your consort reads to you. It's not scripture or poetry. It's a record from the northern village's requests for new farming tools notes about flooding a letter from a child who named her goat after you. You chuckle weakly. Did she spell it right, you ask? Wrote it in soot, your consort says, smiling, phonetically. You nod, close enough. KB arrives late. She brings you a reed boat. Tiny, handmade, tied with string, painted with care. It floats, she says. I hope I do too, you reply. She presses it into your hand. Historians argue about what comes next. Some say you died in your sleep that night. Others claim you lingered another week enough to sign a final treaty with Byblos. One tablet suggests you gave a speech so moving the entire court wept. The truth is quieter. The truth is that you dreamed, not of temples, not of gods, but of the river. You were standing in it, knee-deep, laughing. Water lapped against your legs. The sun was low. KB sat on the shore chewing a fig. Your consort skimmed pebbles across the surface. No one bowed. No one chanted. And you were barefoot. When your breath finally left, it didn't stop. It shifted. Into wind. Into reed. Into the soft hush of morning prayers recited, not because they're ordered, but because they're remembered. Your tomb was sealed before sunrise. On its door, no curse, no boast, no declaration of divine legacy. Only one phrase etched in humble strokes. He chose to listen. That inscription still draws visitors. Not pilgrims, listeners. Some say they hear whispers in the dark hall. Others leave flowers or letters or questions. One scribe once carved on the wall, "If you hear this, thank you." And for centuries, no one erased it. Because memory like you refuses to obey the laws of dust. You are no longer, and yet everywhere, not in the body laid gently on alabaster swaddled in linen soaked in cedar and myrrh. Not in the gilded mask placed over your still face. Not even in the sarcophagus carved from red quartzite, resting beneath 1,000 tons of silence. You are in the ritual now. It begins at night. The priests, 20 of them all shaved and trembling, gather around your body. They do not speak above whispers. Each has memorized the 39 rites. Each carries a symbol, a knife, a flame, a jar, a feather. Your heart has already been removed, but they pretend not to know. For now the heart is still present in word and ceremony, in the beating remembrance of who you were. They address it as if it could speak back. May he not betray us in the hall of two truths. They weigh it against the feather of Ma'at. Of course it balances. You made sure of that. Next comes the anointing. Oils of juniper, cinnamon, and frankincense drip over your limbs like a slow golden river. They chant your names, all of them, every title, every epithet. The list takes hours. Some of the names aren't true anymore. Some never were. But that's the point. This isn't about truth, it's about transformation. You're not just being remembered, you're being rewritten. A cleaner version. A version with smoother marble and fewer doubts. A version that cannot bleed or hesitate or ask why. They wrap you in 370 feet of linen. Tuck tiny amulets between each layer, a scarab for protection, an eye of Horus over your sternum, a knot of Isis at your throat. One priest begins the opening of the mouth ritual. He touches a curved adze to your lips as if chiseling breath back into stone. Let him speak again, he murmurs. You never stopped. Historians still argue whether pharaohs actually believed in the afterlife as described. The fields of reeds, the gates guarded by crocodile-headed judges. The great bark of Ra sailing across the night sky. You did. And you didn't. You believed in meaning and the power of stories to hold people together. To endure when the body couldn't. To whisper something kind in a moment of despair. Your afterlife begins as most do with procession. Your sarcophagus is hauled by ropes and song. Drummers beat slow, steady rhythms. Women cry on cue. Children throw flowers. The whole kingdom appears to line the roads. Some truly mourn, some simply perform. But that doesn't matter, because the act of mourning is also memory. They bury you deep, behind layers of stone and silence. Past hidden doors, past curses scratched into lintels, past chambers filled with golden figurines and chests packed with dried meats, spare sandals, scrolls, and jars of honey you'll never eat. There is a cat statue near your feet. You smile at that if only in concept. Once the last torch burns out, the tomb is sealed. Not forever, just until discovery. Because you are not done. You are a whisper passed from one scribe's reed pen to the next. A dusty footnote on a cracked clay tablet. A myth told by flickering torchlight that somehow feels familiar to the listener, though they've never heard your name before. And when the tomb is opened centuries later, it won't be your bones that matter. It will be the wall you left blank. Archaeologists will argue over it. Did it mean something? Was it a mistake? A lost panel? A forgotten prayer? But some will guess, correctly, that it was an invitation, a question, a door. And in time the people will answer. They'll write poems in the margins of tour guides. Paint your face on postcards. Rename planets in your honor. A child will write an essay called The Pharaoh Who Listened and never know why she cried while reading it aloud. They'll call you reformer, rebel, dreamer, tyrant, visionary, and all of them will be a little right. None of them will be complete, because you like all who tried to change the world without breaking it live in fragments, in statues that smile too softly, in laws that never list your name, in quiet spaces between prayers beneath feet, inside the breath of those who refuse to stop asking, what if a god chose to stay human? Time moves differently now. You are not part of it, but you are not apart from it either. You move in moments, in echoes, in drifting fragments of incense caught in a beam of light, in the hush of footsteps across temple floors, in the silence just after a name is spoken aloud and no one corrects the speaker. Because someone always does speak your name. Quietly, somewhere, the tomb is still sealed. But outside, the world spins on. Dynasties rise and crack. New pharaohs wear your symbols, raise their own obelisks, carve their own truths into walls you never walked. They invoke your reign without remembering your breath. They say your name like punctuation, without pause, without weight. And yet you persist, because you were never built to be legend. You were built to be heard. The people still come, not in droves, not in rituals, but one at a time. A scholar tracing faded glyphs with their fingertips. A laborer who stands too long before carving of your face. A child who tugs her mother's sleeve and asks, "Why does he look sad?" The mother doesn't know, but she tells a story anyway, and so it spreads. In Alexandria, a priest-turned-philosopher reads your law fragments and copies them in his own script. Balance before brilliance, you wrote once, he underlines it. In Rome, a visitor sketches your unfinished wall and writes beneath it, "Even the gods need space to grow." In Thebes, a boy finds your image carved beneath a layer of soot, wipes it clean, and for reasons he can't explain, smiles. Your name crosses languages, loses its vowels, gains new endings, becomes a metaphor, a warning, a poem, a lullaby. In one dialect, it means the king who watched. In another, simply the listener. Historians piece together your reign from shards. Papyrus-scratched limestone fragile glass beads. They argue over the nature of your reforms. Was it real? Was it exaggerated? Were you ill? Were you devout? One day they uncover a sealed jar inside a minor noble's tomb. Inside it, a scroll. Untitled. Your handwriting. The ink barely faded. It reads, "Let them remember not what I built, but what I stopped. Let them name not the things I conquered, but the silences I allowed to speak. Let my name fall away if it means the idea stays. For I ruled not to be remembered, but so that they might remember themselves." A translator weeps reading it, not from grief, from recognition. Because in a world of fire and gold you offered something rare, a pause, a question, a way. Your tomb becomes a pilgrimage site, not official, not priest-led, but persistent. People bring stones, messages, songs. They hum into the air and walk away lighter. And in the quiet that follows, they swear they hear something. Not a voice, not a command. Just breath. The kind that says, "I'm still listening." And you are. Wherever someone dares to rule with humility, to speak without shouting, to lead by stepping aside, you are there. Not in title, not in crown, in method, in mercy. In the soft, steady rhythm of a life that chose truth over spectacle. And when someday the sand buries your image again, and the last statue crumbles and no one remembers the shape of your face, there will still be someone in the dark whispering, "He chose to listen," and that will be enough. The air is cool now, and the light softens to a gentle amber as if the world itself is settling down to rest. You lie back on woven reeds, feeling the rough texture beneath your hands, a humble reminder of earth and river, not gold or stone. Your breath slows, the palace fades, the chants dissolve into the evening breeze. You think back to the boy who once splashed in the Nile's shallows, who traced crocodile shapes on papyrus, who dreamed of a life less scripted. That boy is here, still tucked inside your ribs, tucked inside the stories carved on temple walls, hidden in the quiet spaces between prayers. You have walked a path woven with expectation and rebellion, faith and doubt, crown and flesh. You have carried the weight of gods and the hopes of mortals. You have spoken in silence and listened in thunder. Now as the sun dips below the horizon and the first stars blink awake, you let go, not with fear, not with regret, but with a calm surrender to the eternal flow, the river of time, memory, and dream. Your legacy is not carved in stone or sealed in scrolls. It is alive in every whispered prayer, in every question dared, in every breath drawn in wonder beneath the vast sky. You are the pharaoh who chose to listen, And that choice echoes beyond the ages. As night deepens, the world softens. The Nile murmurs a lullaby. The stars watch silently. Somewhere a child turns a page and smiles softly. And you rest. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. I'll be here with another story for you tomorrow night.